Welcome to End of Life University on YouTube. Today I'm sharing with you a conversation from the archives. This is an audio only conversation with Pat Lind Kyle, and we're talking about practices to prepare for the end of life. Pat is an author, and she tells us all about her book, Embracing the End of Life, A Journey into Dying and Awakening. And I think you'll really enjoy this conversation. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Also, subscribe and leave a rating and review wherever you happen to listen to the podcast. And if you'd like to help out with a small financial contribution to keep this channel on the air, you can go to eoluniversity.com/support. There you'll find 3 different ways that you can join our team and make a contribution, which will make a big difference. And I appreciate it in advance if you choose to do that. So now we'll move on with my conversation with Pat Lind Kyle. Welcome to End of Life University podcast, where we share real talk about life and death. I'm your host, Dr. Karen Wyatt, and this is episode number 422. Today I'm sharing with you an interview from the archives, which means that the sound quality is not as good as we've been used to for a few years now, because I didn't own a good microphone back in the day when I did this interview, but it's still a really wonderful interview. So be patient and give it a listen. I'm speaking with Pat Lind Kyle, who is an authority on mindfulness meditation. And we're talking about her book, Embracing the End of Life, A Journey into Dying and Awakening. And it's really an excellent resource for preparing for the end of life. I'm not going to do any other announcements today because actually at the time this interview airs, I will be traveling in Portugal, which I'm very excited about. So I'm getting this ready for you in advance before we leave on the trip, just to make sure you have something to listen to while I'm away. I'll tell you all about the trip when I get back in a couple of weeks. But meanwhile, enjoy this conversation with Pat Lind Kyle. Today, I'm happy to welcome my guest, Pat Lind Kyle, who is an author of 4 science and spirituality books, including her latest book, Embracing the End of Life, A Journey into Dying and Awakening. Pat is a thought leader on how the mind and brain work together to arrive at a sense of who we are. For decades, Pat has been exploring multiple aspects of life and death, and she has studied the dying process in preparation for her own death. She has become a leading authority on death and dying consciously. In her book, Embracing the End of Life, she provides practical wisdom on the dying process, as well as a step-by-step program on how you can wake up to a place of freedom and enhance the meaning in your life. Pat has a Bachelor of Science degree and a Master's in East-West Psychology. She's also an authority on chakras, the Enneagram, and mindfulness meditation, and has produced a series of guided meditations to accompany her books. You can find out more about Pat, her books, and all of the work that she's offering out there at her website, which is patlindkyle.com, and I'm going to spell it, so write this down, PATTLINDKYLE.com, patlindkyle.com. So Pat, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. But not only I have a very big thank you for you because of your beautiful foreword that you've written in my book. It is just so perfect in terms of setting up what goes on in the book. So thank you. Personally, thank you.
Oh, well, you're so welcome. I was honored when you asked me if I would write it. And I'm happy now to share your book. It's such an important and valuable book because it is practical. It's filled with practical information and practices as well. And that's one of the things that made me very excited to share it with people. And we'll be getting into all of that in just a few minutes. But before we start, I was wondering, Pat, if you would just tell us a little bit more about your story and how you first became interested in learning more about the dying process and the fear of death.
Well, this is a very interesting story, how this happened about 5 years ago. I was in the process of getting ready to go to the East. I live in the West. Go to the East to spend a month in meditation. And I had an appointment, and my appointment was in a very cold office. And this was kind of the beginning of August. And I went from that cold office into my hot car. And instead of opening the windows and letting all the air out and getting it more in balance, I just zipped on because I had a lot of different appointments to do before I went home to get ready. And I got home and I was sick. I was so nauseated and felt like I was going to throw up, and I had a horrible headache and realized that I most likely had heat exhaustion, which, it's a very, I don't know if you've ever had it, but it's horribly uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And what I realized is that I had 2 days to get ready, and I needed to get myself in balance, meaning I needed to not go to the hot or the cold, but just stay in a balanced home. And I did that, and in a couple of days I felt pretty good. I was pretty amazed. So I did take the trip, and on the plane I was fine, got outside in Boston, and I heard over the speaker, it said, "This is the hottest summer." No, I think this is the hottest summer, but 5 years ago it was the hottest summer and the most humidity that we have had here in New York and in Massachusetts. Mm. I could not believe it. So I got in a little van that took me to the retreat center, and it was true. It was incredibly humid. And I do live in the West, and it is not humid. So that was another thing that set it off again. So for the next 2 days, I didn't feel good. And it just so happened that my job at this retreat was to make the salad. That means I had to go into a refrigerator that was 34 degrees and come out so that cold and hot again. I mean, isn't that amazing? So I don't usually have that kind of a job, but it just set me up again to feel very, very sick. So about the second night, I went to bed not feeling well, and at 2 in the morning, it always seems to happen when the teachers are gone, everybody's either meditating or asleep, so it's totally silent. I had the feeling of absolute terror, just beyond fear, beyond anything. I was in horrible, horrible, horrible terror, and I didn't know what to do. I mean, I made CDs of meditations. I listened to my meditations. I walked around. I did yoga. I couldn't shift it. I couldn't shift this feeling that I had, and so finally, I just went back to my bed and I sat there and I said, "Okay, Pat, what is going on? Why are you in terror? What is happening?" And probably has happened to you and many of your listeners. I heard a voice. It could have been a voice. It could have been a knowing or an insight. But I got the sense that it was saying, "You are frightened to die." And, I mean, I have to admit, Karen, that I never really thought about death. Yes, I've worked with hospice. I've been with people that are dying. But I never thought I would die. It's that same old thing. But I'm not going to die. So I've never really looked into it. I mean, I know the process. I know what you do with people. I know all that. But not me. So I just sat there and I said, well, if that's what's happening, I guess I'm going to die. I mean, I was in a little tiny town. It didn't even have a motel. I didn't have a car. They didn't have a phone at that time to call my husband to say, he couldn't come and get me anyway, could he? So I just said, well, I'm just going to lay down here, and if I die, I die, and it's going to have to be okay. And believe it or not, I went to sleep. And the bell rang, of course, for breakfast, and I woke up, and I felt great. I really felt good. And I was so surprised that I felt so good. I mean, the whole feeling of sickness was gone. The whole feeling of terror was gone. And it just so happened I had an appointment with a teacher that day. So I told her my story, and she said, well, you really faced your ego. Because she says the ego is the one that's so frightened to die. And you just faced it and let it go. And she said, you are very courageous. And I thought, yeah, I didn't feel courageous. I didn't know what else to do. And it was an incredible month. I was in silence for a month. And I really learned a lot about myself and my fear of death. And it was an important time. And then I came home, and my husband had knee surgery, so I was very involved in his knee replacement. And then after he started getting better, I was meditating in the morning one morning, and it was if this book just came down from the top of my head. And when I was through meditating, I started writing down the different subjects that I wanted to look into. And so I think I was meant to write this book. What do you think, Karen?
Yes, it definitely sounds like it. And it's just so important because that terror that you experienced that night, that to me epitomizes, I think, the death fear, the death phobia that permeates our entire society and culture. If we were to really look at it and really dig down into it, I think your terror represented that greater terror of our society, and that as a rule, most of us, if we were to look inside and really think about the fact we're going to die, would find a similar terror there. And I don't know if that seems true to you from your experiences.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. And so with that fear then, I didn't have, it was gone. And I started looking up, well, what really happens when you die? And my question is, what happens physically to my dying? But what was happening in the meditation was, what happens to my mind? What kind of mind do I die in? Because I was in a Buddhist meditation at that time, and of course it's all mindfulness. And it was like, well, I know my mind now, and I know apart from the awareness, but what is the mind? Isn't that important to know when I die? So, but what I started out first was to look at physically. What happens to me physically? What happens to me psychologically? And what happens to the spiritual part of dying? And I got so involved in this. I remember my husband saying, Pat, could we talk about something other than death tonight at dinner? I was into it.
Well, I could just imagine that once you started exploring and learning things, each thing you read led you to something else that you needed to investigate and learn about at the same time.
You're absolutely right. And I have a studio here on the property, and I would just sit and have these big poster papers all around me. When I'd get an idea that was different, I'd put it on this one and this one. So you know why the book is very big. I was shocked it was so, it's almost 400 pages. It was just, I really covered the waterfront. I needed to know for myself what it's going to be like when I understand it's the most important experience that I'm ever going to have. what's it going to be like, and how can I prepare for it in the best way?
And I love the fact that you mentioned that this is the most important experience any of us will have, and yet most people don't realize that at all. Most people have no idea about the dying process, and that for us spiritually, it's transformative and profound.
That's right. That's right. So that kept me going even more, to find out, what do I need to do to prepare for it. Then I thought, what about my children? Wouldn't it be nice if they had a sense of what it's going to be like, and what would it be like for them to know what I want to be taken care of? For example, how do I, for example, I do not like my feet rubbed. I know a lot of people, I see that in hospitals. And there's certain things that I want to have as people that would be caregivers to me if my death is on a deathbed, not an accident or something like that. And so I got fascinated about what are the ways in which I want to be treated. So in my book, as you mentioned, a lot of exercises and affirmations and meditations and things that will get me deeper into the process. I know you mentioned that, and I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. And really, it seems like the goal here is to overcome the fear of death. And am I correct in saying that was your whole journey of all of this exploration and reading and searching things out was probably helping you with your own fear and helping you address it?
Yeah, I did. The fear that is now 5 years ago was different than it is now, but the fear for me, living in a small mountain town, but still I can feel it in our community now, and we do have a little community, but I can hear it see it in the papers and on the computer that people are frightened. People are very, very frightened. Look at kids are dying. 5 years ago, we weren't having so many children in schools being killed, and neighbors, and it just feels like the threat is closer to home than it's ever been. And so, for me, I feel my book is very important because it says, how do you want to look at your own death, and what's going to happen when you're told maybe that you have a life-threatening illness? How are you going to respond? And if you know how you're going to respond, it's not going to be such a shock. And that's why I did it. And I also realized that people are not going to know how they want to be treated. Because how are their families going to know? And I know that a lot of families, and you've probably been involved in it, being a hospice physician, that you hear people arguing about what kind of music should we play, or do we do that at all, or all these arguments that they may have about their resistance to the person that's dying or their relationship to them. So if all that is taken away and there's a calmness and there's a readiness, the death is going to be so much easier.
Yes. Oh, yes, absolutely. And you're so right. I've seen it many, many times in hospice. In the vast majority of families and patients are not prepared. They haven't had a conversation with one another. They haven't thought through what their wishes might be at the end of life. And so they're really in the moment of crisis at loose ends, just trying to figure out how to make decisions and how to move forward and what to do next. And increases the pain and suffering that they're experiencing so much more when there hasn't been any preparation, and it feels so chaotic. And also, as you mentioned, the conflict that can arise between family members, because it might be the first time they've ever thought about, what do I actually think about death? What do I actually think about what death is or what it means, and what's right or wrong about how to approach death? And so emotions are already high, and then you bring in such a charged question as what do we do for our loved one at the end of life? And it's just really a situation that's ripe for discord and conflict, and it's very sad to see that happen.
Very sad. It's very sad, because a person that is dying is going through a major letting go. It's not just the family, they're letting go of their identity. And they're going, as you know, they're going in and out of the process of dying because the will is so strong to live here. Yet death is the leader here. It's taking, we're not in control. Didn't you see that? I'm sure you saw that many times, that death is in control. Just like when we're having a baby, birth is in control. You say, no, I'd like to have it on September 5th. Well, that may not happen.
Yes, exactly.
So I have a friend right now whose mother is dying, and she calls me back and forth. She's in Iowa, and her mother is really saying, it's tonight. It's tonight, Beth. But the next day she gets up and she wants dinner, and she wants, it's that will to understand that to go through this letting go process that I talk about in the book. If you have a sense of what that is, it's going to be so much easier to let go, not only for the dying person, but for your family as well. And so one of the things that when I wrote this book, and I found an agent, and he said, well, I don't know if I want to take a book on about death, blah, blah, blah. He said, let me look around a little bit. And he's in the East, and he knows all the big publishers and so forth. And he looked around, and he said, I've checked. There are a lot of books on hospice and caregiving and doctors' position on what's happened to their patients and so forth. But there's nothing on a book that's been written about how do you want to be taken care of when you die, and how do you prepare yourself and your family for your own death. And I thought that was revolutionary. I couldn't believe that there's never been a book out like this for this very important moment, as you say, in your life. Have you found that true?
Well, it's hard. There's such a big variety of books out there, and I definitely haven't read everything, so I don't want to say that. But I do think that we need all the books we can get that look at this more spiritual aspect of death and dying combined together with the practical aspect of it, and teach people practices they can use in advance to get ready for death. I think that we definitely need much more of this kind of information out there for people.
Yeah, I do too. What was really important for me was the stages of resistance. And this has been around for a long time, as you know. What was her name that wrote the book on death and dying that really started hospice?
Oh, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross.
Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And she was talking about these stages of resistance. In what way? I don't think it was so much in death, but was it in just preparing people in hospice, was it? I can't remember.
Oh, she was writing about her experiences with patients who were terminally ill. Yeah.
That's right. And I think looking at that of course, as soon as you find out you have melanoma in your lung, for example, you are going to be scared to death. I mean, you're going to really be frightened. It's going to be a fearful event, and then you're going to actually go into that place which he calls anger, which is a victim of fear, just being totally the victim and beginning to lose this identity of, my God, I'm not healthy anymore. I'm not a regular person. I've got this thing in my body that will kill me. And then she talked about bargaining, and haven't you heard? What are the new things out there that can open up my lungs and get this melanoma out of it, and blah, blah, blah. So this whole bargaining thing comes in, and I've heard that so many times, hoping for some kind of miracle here. And then going into depression, this darkness, and just, I guess I'm just powerless. I can't do anything. I'm losing a sense of power. And then the despair. I put despair in my book because it's recognizing that really I realize nothing can be done now. Absolutely nothing. And when I worked as a counselor with people, and I work with people that are in despair, I found that what would happen is I'd say, okay, go into that place of despair. Just feel it and feel it. And what would happen is there's nothing more to do, and they literally go into space and nothingness, which is the opening to that expanded self that I talk about in the book. So it really is. Some of these things that she wrote about are really very important, and seems like we all go through that when we come up to the fact that maybe we are going to die.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely. I think there definitely are various stages that we go through as we're processing that information, and especially if we have never thought about it before and it's coupled with a terminal diagnosis, the power of that is so shocking when you first hear that news. But it's funny because I always, as a doctor, I always thought to myself in my family practice clinic, like, the thing that might be the most helpful to some people is if I just told every single patient, you're going to die someday. Like, not today, not from this virus you have, but someday you're going to die, and you need to know that, and you need to remember that, and start embracing that fact. But I never had the courage.
And what was the reason? Oh, you didn't do it.
No, I didn't do it. But I always thought, it seems like we should know that already. We should we should know that we're mortal, we're human beings. But you admitted that just had not sunk in to you until that night when you woke up in the terror. You hadn't considered that reality. So anyway, it's just fascinating to me that we stay in denial of death as long as we possibly can until there's no way to deny it any longer.
I know that it is very strange. I think the ego and the identity of this self is so strong, it won't let you. It just won't let you. That was the teacher was saying. You looked at this ego straight away, and you said, okay, I'm not going to fight it. And I guess that was the blessing. What was it, Woody Allen that said, God, I'm not frightened of death. I just don't want to be there when it happens.
Mm-hmm.
The attitude that it is. But what do you think happens when you read all this information that's coming over the airways and the computer and the news and all this? I wonder how people are thinking. Are they getting more available to begin to look at maybe it might happen to me? Or I wonder if more people are getting their trusts and their health care directives and that kind of thing.
I think that baby boomers are beginning to look at their mortality, but I think it's because their own parents are dying, and they also see signs of aging in themselves if they really admit it. I shouldn't even say they. I'm a baby boomer too, but it's seeing the signs of aging, like certain parts are kind of wearing down a little bit, and I can't deny that anymore. Like, my body isn't what it used to be when I was in my 20s, and things have changed. And so I think that's part of it. But you're right, we are in a way being bombarded with images of death, it seems, in our society, of hearing about the suicide rate and opioid deaths.
Oh my goodness.
And, so I think there's a bombardment, but I'm not sure that helps us open to death, or if it actually makes us run away more or project it out more and assume that's other people dying. It won't happen to me.
I find that people that do meditate seem to be more open to it, because death really is a letting go process. I mean, yeah, we push it away, but we really need to let go. What is it like to let go? What have we had to let go in our life? And if you really look at it, we've been through many transitions in our life. I mean, we've, we had to let go of Mama to go to school, and then had to let go of our family if we went on to college, and maybe we got a job and they let us go,
Mm-hmm.
And being a physician, you had a lot of letting go as you were. I mean, I always think that being a physician, you had to go through so much in medical school. I can't even imagine it. But it's that letting go that will really allow us to have a peaceful death. It's that letting go of saying, and in meditation, which I really talk about, saying the benefits of meditation is to create an ability to find this quiet place inside, and it's usually getting to know that space inside that, thoughts go through, sensations go through, emotions go through, but there really isn't anybody in there doing that. So in meditation, it begins to lessen this ego, this identity that I'm really a person, that I'm really this expanded place inside that has a knowing quality, that maybe you want to call that yourself. But it really starts reducing the hold on from the ego. And in my book, in the last part of the book, I have an exercise on forgiveness, because lots of times if you're running into what you talked about, there's a lot of squabbling and situations where families are not at even temperament, that this forgiveness of family members or relationships or past experiences need to be done before we die. And not only does it calm the nerves down and we've faced that, or we've talked to them and released that anger and that tension, but it also releases our attachment to this world that we're letting go of. I mean, it's huge. Death is huge. Of letting go of our identity, but letting go of everything. I mean, our cookbooks. I mean, you go through our pictures. Everything, our houses, our friends, our life, our profession, our everything. And not to prepare for that is a little scary for me.
Mm-hmm.
That needs to be done in order to just be able to die in a peaceful way.
And it's interesting talking about those attachments, because there have been multiple times when I visited a patient in their home who was close to death, And the family would show me through the house and end up showing me, oh, look, my dad used to collect these, little model cars, or look, this is my mom's doll collection or spoon collection, or, there would always be something, a whole room full of all these items or objects that the person had collected all through their life that had been so important to that person, that here these items were carried from house to house whenever they moved and dusted and, taken care of. And so when I would talk to the patient, I would say, oh, I was just looking at your doll collection. The patient would just look at me and say, oh, I don't care about that anymore. And it was so telling to me that there is a point, like those are all our attachments, and we create them throughout life because we find meaning in it, but we're letting go of all the things that used to mean something to us or used to give us meaning, and suddenly that all seems empty as we get closer to death. And so I was fascinated to observe that, and you could actually literally see changes, from day to day and week to week as patients stopped caring about things that used to matter to them.
And when you brought that up to the family, were they aware of what was going on?
I think that the families were concerned about it because it didn't quite make sense to them. But you always loved your collection. Like, how could you not? And families sometimes wondered if that was a sign of depression. Should Dad be treated for depression if he doesn't care anymore about the things he used to care for? And then we would talk about this as part of the normal process of letting go that patients experience as they're approaching death.
Yeah, that's surrender. And so it's really death is leading. Death is leading us. And so that control has to dissolve. And again, that's huge. Just letting go of our control of everything has to be incredibly freeing. Has to be incredibly freeing. I know my dad said when he died, he said to me when he was dying, he said, Pat, what have I done in my life that's worthwhile? That kind of took me back. And I said, well, Dad, look at all the things that you've given to people, he was in business, he had a business, and how he treated people with such kindness and with such awareness of who they were. What a gift, Dad, you gave to these people. But I was really caught off guard. But I understand that really understanding our worth before we die is incredibly important. And I'm sure you've heard that maybe there's a look at your life as you're dying. I've heard that periodically. I don't really know, of course, if it exists. But what would it be like if we began to have a look at different sections of our life now and look to see what was the meaning here for me? What did I gain from that? What did I learn? And when could I give that back if I haven't done that at this time? So I'm getting incredibly interested in doing that kind of work with people to prepare them. I'm calling it aging wisely, but it's really looking at what is meaningful that I have found in my life that's been really important. Did you find that too with your patients?
Oh, yes. That was one of the conversations that I listened to or had conducted with patients. Oftentimes they were searching for meaning and wondering what their life had been about. And again, because they were letting go of so many superficial and material things that used to have meaning for them, they wanted to know the deeper meaning. And oftentimes it involved love. Who have I loved? Did I genuinely love the people that came to me in my life? And I want to make sure that I show them that love now while I still have a chance.
Wow, that's really interesting. Because also in the book that I wrote, I began to look at I was really interested in how in the world did we develop this ego or this identity, and I guess we don't keep it when we die. So how do we develop that? Why did we develop that? And so in the last part of the book, I take called the step of separation. And when we are born, we pop out, right? And we begin to physically separate from that interior of our mother. And so, and it grows, that separation grows as we get older, of course. And then, I go through steps. I don't want to take the time to go through each step, but there's a step of separation, there's a step of emotions, and a step of this mind that begins to be more powerful than our body. We begin to be in our minds more than we're in our bodies. And then on our identity. And so I look at, okay, now how do we get that love that you're talking about? Was I loving enough? Did I love them? And so the last part of my book is to develop, how do you begin to develop love and open up your heart? So first of forgiveness, that really begins to open. It begins to let go a little bit of what you've been holding on to. And then I have exercises and meditations and videos on what's it like to forgive. And maybe it's forgiving the past, but right now, the forgiveness, but I meant gratitude. The next one is gratitude, is how can I be so grateful now for what I have and what have I had in the past? And that gratitude, interestingly enough, begins to expand us, begins to open us, so we begin to feel that space that's inside that begins to feel that space outside. And I think that's an incredible gift to give yourself before you die, is to really open up to gratitude. Did you find that too?
Oh, yes, very much so. And I think that's a wonderful practice to have, but even to have it throughout life, a practice of gratitude. And I was tying that together with something that you wrote, wanting dying to be different than it is a source of more pain at the end of life. But I think also wanting life to be different than it is, like wishing that we had a different life. I think that causes us more pain, and the idea of being able to get to gratitude where we just feel grateful for whatever life has brought us or given us, I think that elevates us to a higher state if we can stay in that place of gratitude.
Yeah, I agree with you that and about the pain. When I ask people about dying, they say, well, I'm not frightened to die, but I don't want to be in pain. I don't want to feel the pain. And so in my book, I have a meditation on how you can work with any pain you have now. I have a little pain in my knee or my hip or something. How do I work with the pain, which is really a sensation in its intensity, and it's a kind of a pulsation. And if I learn to move into my heart and extend that pain, extend that feeling of heartfulness into my pain, it's absolutely amazing how it begins to dissolve itself. It may not be instant pudding, but after a while it begins to soften and move. So the heart, I understand, according to heart math, is that the heart has 5,000 times more magnitude than your brain, or 1,000 times more electrical energy than your brain. So the heart is really the key to our life, and it's the heart in which we die in. I also am very interested in the brain, so I looked and see what are the brain frequencies that we die in. And there's been recent research at the University of Michigan that you're probably aware of, that when the heart stops, they can still pick up pulsations from, or whatever they pick up, from the brain. And they found the brain is in a gamma frequency, which is a very high frequency. It's a frequency that when you feel compassion for someone, not empathy, but you really feel compassion for what's going on now in the world and in your life, and also kindness. You know, the Dalai Lama says his religion is kindness. So I find that fascinating, that we really die in that higher energy, which is what the heart produces. We die in that. What do you think?
I love that. I love that idea, and I love tying that together with the actual studies that have been done to show the gamma waves that are still present after the heart stops, in a way to reinforce this idea that we really die. We die in love. We die in compassion, and rather than dying in fear, and that we can reach this expanded state if we prepare for it and we're ready for it when dying comes.
And so I thought, Cully, I would really like to practice that every day. So, I mean, you can tell that I wrote the book for myself. And I've got this video, and people can look on my website, pattlynkyle.com, and I have something like 16 videos. The last video is a video from going from the very base of, I'm going to talk about a chakra, which is your energy systems going up. And when you go on this video, it'll be a color of red, which is a basic color of a chakra. And there are different colors. You can close your eyes if you want to, too. There are binaural beats, so that if you have the earphones in both ears, it will take you through the frequencies of each energy area of your body, and it will end up in gamma. It will, and when you open your eyes, you will see that it's white, because supposedly that's the white light. So I practice this every day as if I'm dying, so that I go through and opening my heart and then going up into this energy of gamma, which is what they say we die in. And I think that's one of the greatest practices to do.
And so let me ask, Pat, so that's something that someone can just sit down in front of their computer and watch or listen to this video and experience the meditation, even someone who themselves, may not have practiced much meditation. They can actually sit and experience it. Do they wear headphones? Because
they do.
Use that for the binaural.
They're binaural beats.
So that's
wonderful, and it's free.
Yeah, that's amazing. Because I wanted to ask you that because you mentioned before that those who meditate, and I've experienced this multiple times as well, people who have had a meditation practice or a practice of contemplation of some sort throughout their lives, definitely have an easier time with letting go at the end of life. And that's why I believe, as I'm sure you believe, that it is really important for us to start practices now while we're healthier and we're not at the very end of our lives as far as we know. So that it's almost like when women take Lamaze classes to prepare for childbirth, so that they can learn how to breathe and learn how to stay in a calm state during labor. We need to take classes and prepare ourselves in the same way so that we're ready for this experience of the dying process.
Boy, that is so good. I did not put that in my book, but I should have. That is exactly right. Thank you for that. It's exactly right, that preparing so that you can be ready for it. You reminded me of Shokun Rinpoche's book, Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, where he he writes about being a young boy in the monastery, and he has a master, and the master took him to the master's, I guess it was a helper, some kind of a helper that the master had, and he took Shogun Rinpoche to the bedside, and it was a difficult death, a very hard death, and that really kind of scared Shogun Rinpoche. And then a few weeks later, one of the monks was dying, and he took him to the room where the monk was dying, and it was calm, and it was peaceful, and it was a very easy death. And he just saw the difference right there, what the difference is, and that's what you're saying.
Yeah, and I feel like some of the fear around death is the fear of what we imagine death might be like, and that's the fear that makes us contract and run away and avoid death. When if we keep listening to conversations like this that remind us that death does not have to be full of fear and full of tension and full of terror. Death can be calm and peaceful if we prepare for it. I mean, my hope is that we will convince people that it's worth it to do some practices now and to start to prepare themselves so they're ready for it. And I'm sure that's your hope as well through your book. And your book is full, I want to emphasize, it's full of various practices and meditations and even just experiences and activities from different perspectives as well. So there's kind of something in there for everyone, it seems to me.
You know, I realized after I wrote the book that I had this dream while I was writing it that families would take the book and maybe every month get together and get a chapter, read a chapter, and study it, and then come together and do a meditation, which is in almost every chapter. And so I know that reading a meditation isn't really good. So what I did was I just recorded the meditations that are in the book. So there's binaural beats, and there's music that create the binaural beats. And there's meditations like there's a pain meditation. And there's what's the meaning of your life, and how do you prepare to let go? There's a meditation for that, and a meditation for dying and after death. That's the meditation I wrote for myself, that when I die, I want that to be playing over and over and over again. And then the next one is a preparation for afterlife, and then a preparation on how a person dies, so that you can get this CD and begin to just listen to that if you don't want to read the book, but you'll get an idea of it and get a feeling of the letting go. Mm-hmm. And then and when people do this work together, if maybe it be a women's group or a church group, just or a book, people that do books together, read different books. I have a facilitator's guide that says when you begin this, you should have a facilitator that will lead a meditation. Here's an example. And then here's an example of the first chapter, what you would do. So it's a very simple little facilitator's manual that will give them a head start.
That's a wonderful resource. And I do really like that idea of coming together as a group. And here's something that I've been hearing about. I've been hearing about this from some baby boomers who have either chosen not to marry or chosen not to have children, who don't feel that they have a close-knit family around them. So they're consciously creating a family unit with friends who are like-minded, and they have all agreed that they're going to support each other through the end of life. And to me, it seems like that kind of group would be ideal to go through go through the book together and practice meditating together, because again, it's almost like doing a Lamaze, Lamaze exercises with a group of people. Like, it's powerful when you're all doing it together, and you have a partner in a sense in that group who's could be your companion at the end of your life. Someone who's been doing this training with you can be there with you at the end of life and remind you of breathing exercises and meditations. And I don't know, it sounds really powerful to me.
Well, thank you. And one of the things I do want to bring up when you said being their caregiver is that I saw this, and I imagine you have seen it too, that it's ideal to have a caregiver that close-knit. Maybe you've done the book together and they really know what you want, and maybe friends will come in or different members of the family will come in. That person, that caregiver that really knows you, can monitor if it's an energy in the room that isn't productive for your relaxation and your concentration on the process of dying. And so that they can monitor and kind of say, well, I think you've had enough time with her or him. It's time for you. So that you're not in control of the situation of all the people, but you have someone that's really supportive of you. That really touches my heart.
Yes, I think that's beautiful. So it could be, I'm just thinking, I have a vested interest in encouraging people to start meditation practices, but I know how hard it is, and I know lots of people who've tried to meditate and said, I'm a failure at meditation, I can't do it. So I really advocate using guided imagery and guided meditations like you produced, because you can't fail, and you can't even feel that you failed. You just sit and you can listen, and it takes you through steps, but also begins to teach your body and your brain this experience of meditating, so that you will gradually be learning how to get to these states all by yourself without the recording. So I just wanted to give a good plug for those meditation CDs that you have, Pat, and the video that's on your website. I think that's really powerful.
Good, yeah. And if people are really interested in understanding how meditation works, I spent 6 months in silence. When I came out, I said, gosh, I don't think many people are going to do this or can do this. I was blessed to have a husband that said, yeah, Pat, go and do that. So when I came out, I won't go into detail about it, but I got very involved in the different frequencies of the brain. And if we understand the different frequencies, they take us right into an incredible meditation. So I have a CD called Heal Your Mind, Rewire Your Brain, and I take you through what it's like to be in beta and how you begin to get out of this busy mind. Because right underneath beta is alpha, which is really our right brain, which is the brain we die in, actually, that is expanded, and it's creative, and it's very much in our body, so we know we're in our body. And then if you move into the next frequency, which is theta, which is our emotions, to really begin to look at our emotions, and which is the area where we get insight, where we get our questions answered. And then the last one is delta. So this will teach you the different qualities of the brain, so you begin to learn how the brain meditates and how to meditate, instead of just kind of sitting there and hoping it's all going to work out.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's just wonderful. And
Thank you.
I really did want to make our listeners aware of this great resource in your book itself, but also the meditation CDs and the video on your website. And so I'm going to remind everyone again that I'm talking to Patt Lind Kyle, and Pat is spelled with 2 T's, and Lind Kyle, when you go look for her website, Patt Lind Kyle, LINDKYLE, PattLindKyle.com. and then look at the resources page. Is that where they'll find most of your meditations there, Pat?
Yes. Absolutely.
And the book that we've been talking about is titled Embracing the End of Life, A Journey into Dying and Awakening. And so once again, this book is all about preparing for the end of life and getting you ready and helping you learn how to practice what you need to practice in order to be in that calm, peaceful, expanded state when it's your time to die. So, Pat, I guess they could get the book on Amazon, but do you sell it also from your website or?
From my website, and also if you've ever heard of CD Baby, it's also on CD Baby.
Okay, all right. So that's good to know for people to know where they can get a hold of it. And then how about the Facilitator's Guide? Where is that available?
That you get on my website.
Okay, all right.
But Embracing the End of Life, the meditations for Embracing the End of Life is also on Amazon. They have all of that.
Okay, so people can probably just search your name on Amazon and find what's available there to purchase, but also come to the website to watch the video and get the Facilitator's Guide. So
and go to Gamma.
Yeah, go. Yeah, I highly recommend to people listening that you look into this book. It's really a valuable resource to have on hand, and maybe today you're not sure this is where you want to go or what you want to be doing, but have this on hand so that it's there, because there will be a time, I can almost guarantee you, there will be a time when suddenly you wake up one day and realize, I need to start preparing myself. And so this book is really an excellent tool to use for that.
Thank you, Karen.
Well, thank you, Pat. Thanks for joining me. It was been a fun conversation to just share our ideas back and forth and talk about your work.
Yes, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed our time, and I learned a lot.
Oh,
a lot from you.
Well, same here. That's why I do this, because I always get to learn so much from the guests I talk with.
That's wonderful.
Well, thanks for taking time out from your schedule, Pat, and I wish you all the best with your book and the work you're putting out into the world.
And I'm really grateful for what you're doing. For what you're doing, not many people are doing it, and you're doing it with such a heart and with such a background so that you know what is needed. I think you're very valuable. Thank you, Karen.
Oh, thanks so much, Pat. Thanks to everyone who's been listening in today. I hope you've enjoyed our conversation. And until the next time we're together, I'll say goodbye.